in this video, I really want to talk about how I go about setting my drag on a bait cast reel. I think a lot of times when we think about setting drag, we think about spinning reels and light line. And on a bait caster, it's different. For me, it's actually very different. And I don't know that there is a complete right way of doing this or a wrong way of doing this. There's a way that I have done it that has just helped me in the past. And so maybe it can help you as well. Now, before we get into that, a couple of big items. As you guys know, I am running a big sale right now over at Fin Fishing. Everything is 20% off. The sun shirts, duck cat shorts, everything is 20% off. Also, from now until the end of the year, I am running a contest over on the website. So basically, for every dollar that is spent over at Fin Fishing, you get an entry into one of 10 different prizes. So I don't have all of those prizes yet, but I do know that I'm going to be giving away a $50 draw glide bait, a $150 arc reel, a $2,000 Humminbird Solix 12 that I used. I'm also going to be giving away basically a trip on your lake with me. So I'm actually going to do a lake break video on your lake. And I'm pretty much willing to travel anywhere in the country. So anyways, pretty cool deal. All you gotta do, purchase something from the Fin Fishing website. You can also sign up for free by signing up for the newsletter, which I will leave linked down below. All right, let's talk a little bit about the bait cast reel. You know, over the years, I have done this a lot of different ways as far as setting the drag. Now, as a lot of you guys know how to set it, you know, typically the tighter this little star drag system is on the side, the harder it is to pull line out. If you look this up online, you're gonna have so many people tell you how to do this in so many different ways. And to be honest, the more that I have fished, the more that I like to be able to control everything when it comes to the drag on the bait caster. So the biggest thing that I have found is that I actually tighten up my drag pretty good on a bait caster. The only time I will get a little bit of a slip on that line is really on the hook set. Like if I'm using, you know, especially if I'm using like braid or braid to fluorocarbon leader, there will be a little bit of drag that comes out on the hook set. But for the most part, I actually lock down my drag pretty tight. And that may not be the best for everyone. You know, if you're just getting started in bass fishing, maybe it's not the best for you. The big thing with me is that I like to be able to control how much line is getting out on a reel. So, you know, there's guys online that will tell you kind of the exact same thing with a spinning reel. And they will tell you that, for example, you shouldn't set the drag on a spinning reel, but you should actually use the back reel function that a lot of these reels have. Now, I'm actually not a fan of back reeling, although you do the same concept that I'm about to tell you with your thumb when you're using a bait caster. I prefer to set the drag on a spinning reel using the little knob on the top. But with a bait caster, it's different. I like to be able to control something. So when I set the hook, the biggest thing is that I have found over the years is that if your drag is too loose, you will lose a lot of fish. If you have a lot of drag slip, or even at times a little drag slip on the hook set, you will lose a lot of fish simply because you are not getting the barb to penetrate through the fish's mouth. And we all know how a hook is shaped. The tip of the hook can get into that fish's mouth, but if the barb doesn't go past it, that is how you end up losing a lot of these fish. You want the barb to go through. And a lot of times, if you're making a long cast, you know, for example, if you're fishing a Texas rigged worm, a big worm like I love to do in the summer, and you're making a super long cast out there, and a fish picks it up, like you need everything you got a lot of times to set the hook into that fish to get that hook past the barb. Now, the only difference is at times is guys that might use a braid to fluorocarbon. Now, I use braid to fluorocarbon on some techniques with a bait caster. I don't use it on all the techniques. But regardless, I don't like a ton of slippage at all, and I don't really even like a bass to be able to pull the drag out when it surges. Now, when a bass surges, when you're fighting a fish, I simply like I've done it for years, I just click my bail and I control it with my thumb. Now, like I said, I think that if you're just getting into bass fishing, this may not be your best bet. because it does take a little bit of a feel, and you start to understand a lot how bass fight, I guess that is, and when they're about to make their surges. So you're somewhat ready for it when it happens. But I've always been a fan of simply doing that, because when I first started bass fishing, I would really get into the single click of your drag. And I always thought that there was a perfect place where the drag needed to be. But the truth is that a lot of times the drag needs to be tighter on the hook set and then looser on when the fish is actually surging at the boat. And so therefore, a lot of times when I'm using a spinning reel, it's very easy for me to kind of twist the top of it as I'm bringing that fish in to let that fish, allow him to have a little bit more line. I could do the exact same thing if I really wanted to with the Baitcaster, but for me, it's easier just to use my thumb and to control. So when a fish pulls it out, I keep my thumb on it and I press it and I let him take out line that I think. Now this is completely a feel thing. And so I understand if you're against it, I understand if you're not all for it, but to me, it's the best way of hooking and landing a fish. I just want to be in control. And so I know that it's a little bit weird, and I know that I didn't even really fully explain exactly what I do, but a lot of times when I get a reel, you'll see me doing that. I'm locking that sucker down. It will slip a little on the hook set, and then after that, I munch it down. And that is even with baits like a jerk bait, which I might only use 10-pound test for, or a crankbait, which I might only use 12-pound test for. Now, there have been a few situations over the years that you run into where you may need to mess around with your drag a little bit. For example, I was fishing a couple of years ago, and I was fishing really shallow grass, but I was casting to the fish. I wasn't flipping and pitching. Now, a lot of times when I'm flipping and pitching, I might use a straight braid, but I was casting to these fish that were on an outside grass line, but it was still pretty shallow grass, like 4 or 5 foot, but I was casting it. And so I was actually in that situation using a braid to fluorocarbon. And if I make a super long cast out there with braid to fluorocarbon, kind of like I talked about earlier, you know, it is very similar to that fish being super close, even if he's super far away. There is a point, especially for me in that situation, because I was using 30-pound braid to a 16-pound fluorocarbon, which is a little bit lighter, and on a Baitcaster, I did need to have my drag a little bit looser. I wanted a little bit more to slip out on the hook set, especially when it became a big fish. Because the very first fish that I locked into that particular day, I was using my frog rod at the time. So it was straight braid. I just attached the fluorocarbon leader. But with a frog, I don't want really any slippage. With this, I wanted a little bit more. And so I did loosen it up, and that was a big deal in that particular tournament. So I know that I didn't really answer it. I know that I didn't, but I prefer that method. I prefer to lock it down a little bit and use my thumb primarily to give line to that fish, which again, it's different than I like it on a spinning reel. On a spinning reel, well, maybe I'll talk about spinning reels tomorrow. Maybe I'll just do that. But anyways, today's all about the Baitcaster. That's the way that I do it. I really trust my line and my rod. Now, I should say that if you're breaking off a lot, specifically on the hook set, because the hook set is where you're going to put the most amount of pressure on a fish, then you might need to loosen that drag up a little bit. If you're breaking off a lot on the hook set, loosen the drag a little bit, allow a little give there. If the fish pulls really hard at the boat, I have had one fish in my lifetime on a Baitcaster that broke my line after the hook set. Every other fish, it's always been hook set. After that, there's been one fish, and you guys probably know the fish that I'm talking about because it's the one that kept me out of the Elite Series. But on that day, that fish caught me in a really bad angle because I was trying to land him. I didn't even have my hand on the rod. And in that situation, if I had had my drag set a little bit looser, I may have made it to the Elite Series. So take that for what you want. I still think it was just a really weird situation. It is the only time ever in my life that has happened. And so I think it's just a fluke deal. But anyways, hope that you guys enjoy this video. I would love to know your comments down below. Also, I'm sorry, I just keep adding things to this video. Also, I am going to be starting a series on this channel, where I break down like topographical maps and contour, well, same thing, topographical maps and even Google Earth maps of your lakes that you like to fish. We're coming in the winter time of the year. There's not as many techniques to be had during the winter as there is during other parts of the year, and I've covered a lot of them already, and I will still cover them and put my new spin on them and things that I've learned, but I want to start a series where I literally just look at a lake map and try to break it down seasonality. So if you guys have a lake that you live on, that you fish a lot, no matter how big it is, it could be a Gunnersville, it could be a teeny tiny Lake Philpott in Virginia, whatever it may be. It could be all kinds of different lakes. Put them down below in the comments. If you see the lake that you want to have broken down in the comments, then like it. So I will get to the lakes that have the most amount of likes first in this series, which I will probably start next week. Yeah, probably next week. So anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this. I will see you guys in the next one. Also, don't forget to check out that fin fishing gear, 20% off, and I'll see you guys in the next one.